Hey, welcome to the first episode of the Money Shift podcast. I'm Alexander, aka Rex. I am the CEO of Driven Labo.
Hey, I'm Josh. I'm Director of Vehicle Operations with Driven Labo and President with Revhard Motors.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this is something we've been talking about for a long time and excited to finally get it underway. This is going to be a weekly podcast where we're going to bring you news and headlines from across the automotive enthusiast space. We're going to be highlighting cool builds that we come across. We're also going to be interviewing members of the community, like learning about their journey in the automotive world, learning about their builds, speaking with insiders, as well as learning how people have set up their lifestyle to fully indulge in their passion for cars and everything automotive. So, you excited to do this, Josh?
Yes, and I've always been passionate about the community. We want to make this about you guys. We're excited to share our stories and provide this resource for you guys.
Yeah. So, we figured for the first episode, what we're going to do is share a little bit about ourselves, let you get to know us, tell you who we are, what we're doing here at Driven. And yeah, why don't you go ahead and kick that off, Josh? A little
Sure
bit more
thing.
about you.
So, this starts back in high school for me. Like a lot of people who came into the world that we indulge in, I think there's like three major ways that people get into this, and one of them being action sports. The other is the military. I came by action sports. I used to skate in high school, and a few different people started showing up in different souped up Hondas. This was, 97, 98. In 1999, I had a EF Civic hatchback, and I was one of the first people to do a B16 swap. I worked at a performance shop called Import Sports. Some of you may know out here in the Denver area back when it first started out in Aurora. And in that process, I was fortunate enough to meet a gentleman from Japan who was going to see you here at the time. And of course, it didn't take me long to figure out that the cars that we had here vastly different from what was available in Japan. So we always started doing research on co.jp sites and finding out the differences. Big one is like the Civic Type R versus the Civic that we got. And running into this gentleman, he was able to get me the parts that we couldn't get. I was given the manual book for every part essentially for the DC2 Integra, the EK9 Type R. We're talking red H badges, smoked out headlights, the stickers for the side, red carpets, all of that. And that's kind of how I got my journey. I used to work at another shop here called Speed Image, and I would sit upstairs and get the import magazines. You guys probably all remember from early on, like Super Street and
Mm.
all the tuner magazines. And so I would literally just open them up and just start calling shops and ask, hey, where are you getting your cams from and things like that. One of my biggest sellers back then was the Civic Type R cams. When the Civic EM came out, you put a couple of cams in there, you'd be at 14 horsepower. There was a time I cleaned Honda out of cams completely. And so that's what started my automotive journey, was just my infatuation with the Japanese culture. Back then I was encountering a lot of V8 heads. There's no replacement for displacement kind of guys. And that's when I fell in love with Honda. They had very efficient motors, a lot of horsepower per liter. And, you know, once you start researching, you find out about the Nissans and the Skylines and Gran Turismo. I had a PS1, and the only game I ever owned was Gran Turismo. And so I've learned a lot from that. And then over the years, the OBD2 came in, and a lot of the things kind of killed the aftermarket market for a while. I took a sidebar and went into the digital world, digital marketing, making websites, and went back to working in the car dealership business. And so when these cars started becoming legal again with the 25-year-old rule, I took all the connections I had previous from Japan and the knowledge that I had from running and working in dealerships and combined those together to make Revhard. And we're essentially a car dealership for car enthusiasts, very heavily involved in the community. We sponsor a lot of events. We hold a lot of meets, like we do like poker runs and all kinds of different events. So I've always been fascinated with the community. Back in the days, we would meet up at Taco Bell and take over movie theater parking lots. And Nowadays, it's more sanctioned, and we do slush motorsports out at PPIR, but just the community element of it, it's amazing how much friends you can develop just by owning the same car, the passion behind it, the things that are available, making things your own and unique. It's kind of been in my blood. When I was a kid, I used to go to the Safeway and pick up tuner magazines and read them and look at the Nopi catalog. And up until now, being able to experience, going out to Daikaku. We had a group of friends who had R34s in storage. So we went out to R's meeting last year. So it's just, for me, it's about the experiences, the camaraderie, the details of it, and just, really being able to live out the dream. I think a lot of people share the same. And that's really how I got into this automotive world. Started out, with a fascination, and then grew into a passion, and then it became a business.
Yeah. Cool.
How about you?
Yeah. So, yeah, my background is goes back nearly as far as yours. You're only a couple years older than me, so I got started right around '99 is when I got my first car. My background, my whole family is actually has a long history in the automotive space. So, on my dad's side, we go back to the late 1890s with
Oh, wow.
with Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
So yeah, every generation of my family has worked for Mercedes-Benz at some point in time, myself included. And so always growing up with, my dad was all about cars. He taught me everything I know. I was collecting Hot Wheels from an early age, and just it's always been in my blood. And then once I expressed interest in racing, the couple of years before I was able to get my license, my dad was like, "Yeah, all right, let's do this. Let's start with doing some like SCCA solo racing." And we picked up my first car, which was a 1990 Jetta GLI Wolfsburg edition.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, I was really into Euro cars and hot hatches. It's funny because I really wanted a GTI,
Right.
but we found this amazing deal on this pristine GLI. So that's the Jetta version of the GTI, and picked that up when I was 15. Immediately started getting it all prepped and set to take to autocross racing. So I did that through high school, and a lot of my friends were really into Hondas and Japanese cars. I had friends with like Eclipses and Talons, and there's a guy with an MR2, which that was probably one of the coolest cars on campus in high school, to be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, that really ignited my passion. I too started out skating, so I've always had that thrill and the draw to like the adrenaline sports. So I was a skater and a snowboarder, and then once I started racing, I was like, oh no, this is it. This is the best way to get the adrenaline that I'm looking for. And then, excuse me. And then when I went to college, I was introduced to drifting, and that officially like switched me from the Euro cars to JDM cars. I was at the very first D1 at Irwindale, I want to say in like 2001 or 2002. I don't remember what year it was. Yeah, I was there, and that got me hooked on drifting. So yeah, I've had a whole range of JDM cars ever since. I personally fell in love with Nissans, but I think we can maybe talk a little bit more about our car journey here in a minute. And then on as far as it relates to driven, my background has for a long time been in the brand development and product development side of things. As a creative director level designer, and so I've built a lot of just like countless websites and apps, and built brands. And I a couple of years ago decided that I really wanted to merge my passion for digital products and automotive culture. And I guess the other thing to mention too is that I got into the like crypto world in 2013.
Oh, wow.
Through my interest and passion for economics, I discovered Bitcoin, and I thought it was novel and interesting. And at the time, I didn't realize how big it was going to become, but I was just fascinated by it. And so I kept a close eye on that industry until about 2017, when this little project called CryptoKitties came out, which is, if you're at all familiar with the crypto world, you'll know that kind of made a splash because it was one of the first big NFT projects to come out. And it was so popular that it basically crashed the network and made it unworkable for a while. And when I saw, the interest around that type of digital product, and also understood what it could be used for, in that case, it was a very simple game, but I saw, like, just that the sky was the limit as far as innovative things you could do with particularly NFTs, but blockchain technology as a whole. And then made it my goal to work towards being full time in that industry. Started some companies, built some products and some projects, and then in 2019 I went full time with a startup decentralized social network called Float, where I was the VP of user experience and design. And then later I transitioned to the VP of Web3 for the project. And yeah, I've been in that industry ever since, full time. And now what we're doing here at DRVN Labo is we're combining, let's say, digital technologies, like bringing the automotive industry into the 21st century. And to touch on one of the things that you talked about was the importance of community. That's something that Web3 does really well. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that the automotive industry or automotive enthusiast world has kind of struggled with over the last few years, post COVID, and with the introduction of social media. I feel like a lot of it's gone online and lost a lot of the deep connections and family that you get with the automotive culture. And so the hope is that what we can do is parlay the community building aspects of Web3 into the more traditional automotive enthusiast world, and find new and exciting ways to bring car lovers together and do things that they could never do before, which we'll probably get into much further in further podcasts. But yeah, that's my background. That's where I came from.
And I share the same sentiment. So, adjacent to being in the car community and learning about different cars and being involved and all of that, we both grew up with the internet and got to watch the first iteration of this. When I was younger, my father went into computers. This was about the time of the 286 turning into a 386. Before, my first experience on computers was primarily DOS prompts and executables and CD change directories. This is before any graphic interface like Windows came out.
Mhm.
So being able to watch the whole internet iteration take place from Windows and desktop applications to, the first version of the internet, which was just really just an XY access and a link to another page. And then they tied databases to that, made it software online. And eventually we got to a point where the bandwidth and the computing speed and the network capabilities really allowed us to see what the internet is today. And I remember in high school using Netscape for the first time when everyone was still 1,000 hours of AOL disks. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, this is going to change everything. And, now we see Amazon and people like, Google have risen to the top and it's kind of settled out, but I've always seen that. And for me, I've seen Bitcoin in the background and digital currencies and, didn't pay much attention until about 2020. And PayPal, I'm a pretty heavy user on PayPal due to the business that we're in. Any car guy knows you probably have a tie to PayPal. And so in that process, they made me a test user for their wallet, and it only had like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin. And so I purchased some of that, went onto some Facebook pages, learned about the community, learning about different tokens. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that the digital, and I don't even know if you want to call them cryptocurrencies anymore, but digital assets. There's a variation of that that'll come to play eventually. But
Mhm.
it really excited me because, you know, for example, a lot of people in the business world want to go public, right? And so you have to register with the SEC. You have to be an accredited investor to share shares. Well, I like back in the day, you had to have a music label, a distribution company, and very finite gates of entry to put out a hit. And nowadays, you can go to Guitar Center, you can buy all your gear, put a recording on SoundCloud, and distribute it. And I think that the digital assets are going to provide that same access for all kinds of models. And I can just see the future going into logging in at work and streaming money going into your account. And I think eventually the real world assets is what they call it, kind of like our vehicle collection, are going to be
Mhm.
tokenized. And anyone who's bought a house has to pay the insurance company to go look through the historical records of the car and see where or the house, and see where the easements are, and if there's any funny business in the background. Once that's on the blockchain, a house transaction can take a few seconds. So yeah, to showcase your point, the deep passion we have for the car community and the inevitable change that digital assets are going to bring to this world is what inspires us to put Driven Labo together and make this going forward. And I share the same sentiment. And just to kind of go back to the car history and your journey, what would be your favorite car that you've owned, or what's the one you miss the most?
It's funny you bring this up. This is actually kind of the touching on the curveball I was going to throw at us. So let's go ahead and do it now. So what I was going to suggest we do is this is a fun little like content tip I learned from a podcast I watch called My First Million. And they do this thing called first, last, best, worst, weirdest.
Ah,
So what we're going to do is let's play a quick game of that for ourselves. It's going to be first car, last car, best car, worst car, weirdest car, and then I'm going to throw an additional one on there, fastest car.
okay.
So I'll go ahead and get started on that. So my first car I already mentioned was a 1990 Jetta GLI Wolfsburg Edition. That car was sweet because it came stock with BBS wheels and Recaro interior, and for what it was, the little 2-liter 16 valve. That was a peppy little car. That thing was a lot of fun.
Especially for
When
back
I was,
then.
oh yeah, and I did some decent amount of mods on it, mostly suspension mods
Mhm.
because autocross. But that car was easily able to keep up with or beat M3s, like E30 M3s,
Oh yeah,
on the track.
and the
So
Mustang 5.0s
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
from
the
the 80s.
E30 M3s were in my class.
Uh-huh.
So those were the ones that were dominating. Those and like Volkswagen Scirocco's were actually great autocross cars. So that was my first car. My last car, or I guess, well, in this case, we'll go with my current car, is a 97 Nissan S14. So the Koki S14, the one everybody wants. It is currently sitting about 10 feet that way and is, it's because I'm in an office built into my garage. And it's in about 1,000 pieces. I rebuilt the motor over the winter. Right now I'm dealing with a shot transmission. So figuring out what I'm going to do about that. And hopefully going to have it all back together in the next couple of months. I'll be making some content around that as well. So that's going to turn into a series on our YouTube channel of me finishing my my S14 build, probably continuing to modify it after that. But it's got a blacktop SR20 with a GT 3076 turbo, HKS cams, Tomei turbo manifold. They call it a Freddy. That's the fake Greddy intake manifold. 720 injectors. Should easily put down 400 of the wheels, no problem.
The question is though, do you have a welded diff?
I have the stock VLSD,
No.
which is actually great for a road going S chassis. You don't want the the 1.5 way or the 2-way or a welded diff for a street car. The viscous LSD
Or,
is the way to go.
yes.
So the best car that I ever owned probably was my first S14. I've owned 3 of them.
Mhm.
That one I imported a notch top SR20 from Japan. Did a fair amount of mods on it, but that car was just clean and beautiful, pearl white. And I think the car that I currently have will eventually be better than it, but it's still, in 1,000 pieces. But yeah, that car was just so much fun and what made me fall in love with Nissans. The worst car I've ever owned. I say this, but I'm kind of fond of it. A few years ago, I was just trying to save money and I had gotten rid of a Mazda RX-8 that I had and just wanted to pinch pennies as much as possible. So I went out and I picked up this like low mileage, was it like a 2010 Ford Focus base model?
Okay.
A little four-door manual. That thing was slow as hell. Everybody names their cars because I jokingly said it. The car was androgynous. I called the car's name was Pat. If you get the SNL
Okay. Yeah,
reference,
yeah.
so it's Pat. And I mean, that car served me well, though. It never gave me any problems. It was just boring as hell. Most boring car I've ever owned.
The worst car?
Yeah, I'd say that was the worst car. I bet you I can come up with something worse than that. But I've owned a handful of normie cars. I owned
Mhm.
a Hyundai Elantra for a little bit and a base model Lancer. But if we're just looking at purely the package of the car and what you get out of it, that was definitely the worst car I've ever owned.
So then what is the weirdest car you've ever owned?
The weirdest car. So let's see. Right before my daughter was born, I owned was it an 86 Porsche 951, so a 944 turbo.
Okay, and that's the one with
Um,
the engine in the front?
yeah, front engine, so it's basically a Volkswagen, but a Porsche. And I mean, that car was fast as hell. It made like 360 to the wheels, and was a lot of fun. But the reason why it was the weirdest car was because so it had a blow off valve, a vent to atmosphere blow off valve on it, that something was wrong with it. And so when it would, when I'd let off the gas or whatever, rather than making the typical blow off valve, the sound you expect, it would go, I can't even get my voice high enough. It would just go, wee. And I thought it was hilarious and like didn't change it for that reason because it was like this, just insanely fast little, 80s Porsche that would make everybody laugh every time I let off the gas. And then I'd say that was probably honestly the fastest car I've ever owned too. My my first S14 maybe did like 320, 330 to the wheels. I also owned an NA Miata that was turbocharged, and that made about 230, 235 to the wheels, which was pretty fast.
Yeah, those are
But yeah, I think the Porsche 951 was the fastest car I've ever ridden in or
those are
driven.
light.
Oh yeah, very, very light. But I'll just throw this out there. The fastest car I've ever been in was an 1100 horsepower Mark IV Supra. So I used to be friends with and work with a shop in Southern California called Under Pressure Fabrication and Distribution, UPFD. And they built some insane cars. And yeah, I took that car on the 405 freeway and accidentally got it up to about 200 miles an hour. And that was just frightening. That's
That's
terrifying.
yeah, it's a different speed once you break that 150 mark.
Yeah. Yeah. So, especially on a public road. So, yeah, that was my fastest experience. All right.
I'll
Your
for
turn.
me, I'll segue first into that. For me, the fastest car I was able to ride in, my first trip out to Japan in 2001, I believe it was. I was invited to go out for selling a bunch of parts, and my buddy out there had a R32, so we were picked up from the airport. It was me and two other people my size, and so you can imagine how comfortable that could be in the back of a R32 if you've ever seen one. And we were fortunate enough. I didn't even know what I was seeing at the time. We went out in the middle of the night in the hills, like where Initial D was filmed, and I was watching drift racing. Coming 3, 4, 5 around a corner, And I really didn't even fully appreciate that until I got older and kind of let that sink in. But on the way home, we went into the Smoky Nagata tunnel where, everyone's seen that video. And so we were 3, 4 in the morning. He stops and he's like, "This is the tunnel where everyone tries to hit 300. Should we do it?" And we're all like, "Yeah, let's do that." And so this car had about 1,000 horsepower. Also, the fuel was just this massive thing in the trunk, and the speedometer looked like a tachometer. It just we went like 312, I believe, kilometers, and the tunnel lights just turned into a beam of light solid. It was pretty gnarly.
You went plaid.
Yeah, and then this gentleman also owned here in the United States a 3000 GT because it was the fastest Japanese car you could get. And this is way back in the day when there was a lot less people in Colorado, and at 3 in the morning on the highway there was nobody. And I may have played Wanga Midnight that night, and we made a loop around the city that would normally take 30 to 40 minutes in about 13 minutes, and I think I topped out at about 170 on that one. And it's a different feeling when you hit that speed. But anyways, my first car was a hand-me-down car. It was a 1985 Pontiac Grand Am, and it was two-tone. The top was this tan color, and the bottom was a sweet burgundy. So you can imagine how cool that was. And this is back when I was younger, and people were into like Dayton's wire wheels. So I started learning Photoshop, and I was putting Dayton's on it. I had like subwoofers in there. I had some JLW zeros. My friend lived like 5 blocks away, and I'd go pick him up from school, and he always knew when I was coming because you could hear the boom, 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 boom. My last car, and we just did a giveaway on this, was kind of my full circle moment. Going out to Japan that first time, meeting the president of Spoon Sports, offering his parts. I would say the Civic Type R has always been a dream of mine to own, and I was fortunate enough to own a Spoon demo car that was from '98. We're talking every Spoon part you could think on it, from the valve covers, the carbon Kevlar intake, pistons, head gasket, full exhaust, but even the windshield wipers on this car were Spoon. And so we did a contest and a giveaway with that to give back to the community. And so that was really a full circle moment for me to own that car and experience that car and been able to share that with the community. The worst car I ever owned was probably my grandfather's hand-me-down 1992 Ford Explorer with the handicap crane for the scooter in the back. A lot of those old Fords, they fell apart before the turn, but if you really took care of them, they lasted. That thing had almost 200,000 miles on it. It was a jalopy. The weirdest car I've ever owned is kind of a toss-up because I've had a few of those. And so I guess the quirkiest car I had was not really a car. It was called a Mitsubishi Mighty Max. It's a little tiny pickup truck.
Yeah, the mini trucks.
I would love to put a 4G in one of those one day. And it was rear-wheel drive, so you could break the rear end pretty loose. I got into some trouble with that. I had a 1990-something Nissan Cedric, and it was full-on VIP. It had fiberglass body kit, the wood grain dash, the VIP table. I guess you could call that weird. And then the worst car I've ever owned.
I think you already said worst.
Oh,
I think best
I think I
car.
combined the best car I've ever owned,
Mhm.
and the car I wish I still had. I had a TH1 Blue R32 that had some. When the car was on the way here, I found a set of Nismo LMGT1 wheels. These were the wheels you'd see like on the 400R.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't really know what they were, but I had to snag them because they were matching the color of blue. And I paid like $3,000 for those wheels, and then eventually sold them for 12, and now they're worth 20. So that was pretty wild. And so that's kind of the car I miss the most. I remember after we rebuilt that motor, I went on to drive that at night as well. I missed that car. That was probably
Was it a GTR?
It was a GTR. Yeah.
Oh man.
The thing is, like, unless you buy a GTR and fully rebuild it, take the engine out, do all the gasket seals, axles, rubber, like you really have to rehab those cars to fully enjoy them. And so every time I drove that car, it cost me like $1,000 to fix it. And I had the opportunity to get a Nissan Stagia 260 RS. And so I sold that to buy the 260 RS. And then, I've had like a Nissan Pulsar. I've had a whole bunch of Japanese cars that were fun. I had a DC2 Integra that I was never going to sell until I got the Spoon car. But yeah, I've had a lot of JDM cars. But that's kind of my history with the car.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like we've both had just a ton of cars in our lifetime.
Yes.
Probably do a whole episode on each one of those.
Yeah, the one I miss most though is definitely that GTR. And at some point, I do want to build a Mighty Max with the 4G63. And I
Mhm.
think, and I'll ask you the same question. The next car, if I do another car, I would really like to conclude my Honda collection with an NSX. I'm
Mhm.
thinking an NA1 that I'd like to turbo. And until you've driven a 550, 600 horsepower NSX, you haven't driven a car, in my opinion. It is wild because you have like the F1 inspired suspension and handling, obviously the timeless look of it, and then the power of like a Skyline.
Mhm.
Honda was the only company that abided by the gentleman's agreement for the insurance purposes of horsepower ratings. We all know the Supra was faster than 276 horsepower. We know the
Oh yeah.
Skyline was definitely that. So the Honda was the only company that said, yeah, okay, we'll live by that. But if you do happen to have a supercharged or a turbocharged NSX, it's a real kick in the pants. And I think that'll probably be my next iteration. And when we get to that, I'd also like to do some content on that. If
Mhm.
there's a car in the future, what are you thinking? What car would you like to build?
Man, I mean, my dream car honestly is an R34 GTR, but they're so damn expensive. It's probably going to be a while. I'm kind of on the fence between two different cars. One would be just like as a daily driver for fun. Would be an S15. I just love my S chassis. But I also really want to have something that I can go off roading with or tow my cars with. And for that, I want to get you're gonna tell I'm a Nissan fanatic at this point. I really want to get a Nissan Patrol, the like the late 90s one
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the what is it, the Y48. It's like a
Okay.
4.8 liter inline six. It's the one you see all the crazy Arabs like
Yep,
boosting
yep.
up to over 1,000 horsepower.
I've seen a few of those, yeah.
Yep. I wouldn't mind having one of those.
That would be the ultimate setup with the trailer. And
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that would have more than enough torque to tow whatever I need.
So how did you determine and come up with the brainchild of, Driven Labo, driven
Mhm.
vehicles, and the driven culture? And can you help share with our community a little bit about each and where they can find some more information
Mhm.
and kind of explore that concept with us?
Yeah. So just to kind of give you a top level overview on what Driven Labo is and the what we're putting together, what we're building within it. So Driven Labo is the parent company. It's kind of like a what's the term for it? A venture studio where we're going to be building a lot of really cool products
The
that we
umbrella.
think are going to add value to the automotive world. Under that, we have Driven Culture. So this has been around for almost a year now, I want to say. And it started out as a newsletter just where I can share all the cool things that I'm finding, both in the automotive aftermarket and cool builds, as well as all the amazing things that the Web3 community are building. And if you're not in that space, you might not know it, but there's a huge crossover between people that are into crypto and people that are into particularly imports, JDMs, and to some degree, or to a large degree, motorsports. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of projects uh, that are building some really incredible, be it games or communities in the Web3 space for automotive enthusiasts. A few off the top of my head are like Torque Drift 2, which is probably one of the best drifting games out there, which utilizes digital assets for the parts in the cars. There's a company called the Motorverse, which is probably one of the biggest brands in that niche. And technically, Torque Drift 2 is under the Motorverse, but they're doing all sorts of things. They just recently released like a Mario Kart style game. So
Mhm.
they have things that are kind of on that realm, all the way over to hardcore sim racing. And then they also have their own Web3 community called Torque Squad. So if you were to follow me on X, you will see that my profile picture is what we call a Torque Squad profile picture. So bringing that back to Driven Culture, It is currently a newsletter that is published every single day, technically 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, with a sort of a digest recap of the week's headlines on Sundays. If you subscribe, you can opt to get the weekly or just the Sunday edition, or you can, get them both. But pretty soon we're going to be launching a full-blown online publication and a ton of, let's just say, multimedia content under the Driven Culture brand, and this podcast being one of them.
Yeah.
So, I do some sim racing and live streaming, do like interviews and spaces on X, and also in this online publication, we're going to be putting out a ton of really high quality articles on there. So this will be everything from showcasing, some of the new builds that are going viral, showcasing members' rides from our community, talking about, events in the automotive space, motorsports, new games that are coming out, as well as, all the cool things that the automotive Web3 side of things are doing. So really showcasing the IRL and the digital sides of automotive culture and bringing them together into one place where you can, really get a feel for everything that's going on for people like us who love cars. And then the other thing that we're working on right now is it's called an RWA app. It's a real world asset app called Driven Vehicles. And you can check that out at drvnvhcls.xyz. That's DRVNVHCLS. That's it right there. .xyz. And the idea behind this is something that's been I've been developing for a long time, and finally it was like, this needs to happen. And effectively what we're doing is we are tokenizing ultra rare investment grade vehicles for fractional ownership. So as I mentioned earlier, like my dream car is an R34 GTR. On the low end, that's like $150,000 car. You look for, a special edition of some sort, you're talking as high as like $300,000 easily, some even more.
Yes,
And so, yeah. So with this platform, what you'll be able to do is own a fractional share of that car, and you'll actually have a real fractional ownership of it, legally speaking. And the there's going to be a whole bunch of benefits that come along with being an owner. You'll be part of a community of co-owners of that car. You'll work with your community to come up with interesting ways to monetize the cars through creating content around it, turning it into, like building merch off of it, kind of turning it into a online celebrity in and of itself that can be monetized. And then in a proportional ratio to the amount of shares you own, you'll also be able to get dividends on, or I guess profit share on, the revenue that car generates. It also come from like when we open up our HQ, the Driven Labo HQ, we're going to have our collection of cars stored there, and it'll be a public where people can come pay an admittance fee, I suppose, to come and view the collection, and a portion of that revenue will go to the owners of the cars in the collection as well. So I don't know, there's a lot more I could touch on there, but one other cool perk on it too is that if you own a full share of one of these cars, you'll get a digital twin NFT of it that then you can take to different partner Web3 video games and race that car that you own in those video games. And we've already got some of these partnerships lined up. And so excited to share what we're doing with that. But there's going to be a whole lot more to it than that. But, think of it like I jokingly call my S14 my alternative 401k, because they keep going up in value so much. And so, if I hold on to it for another 30 years, that thing is going to be worth just an insane amount of money. Well, think about it the same way if you were to own a share of a Z-Tune R34. That car is going to, without a doubt, appreciate over the years. And so your share in that car is also going to appreciate as well. So yeah, that's really the concept for driven vehicles. That app is coming very soon. We're going to be launching the beta version of it in the coming weeks. So definitely go over to drvnculture.xyz. That's DRVN culture, spelled out culture.xyz, and sign up. And also follow us on social media. You can see the links down below, and that's where you'll get all the updates on all of the the releases as they come.
Yeah, and just to expand on that just a tad bit,
Mhm.
please do go to the drvnculture.xyz, get that signed up. You can hear for more information there. And even in my line of work here at Revhard, I have several customers that want to get in on the trend of buying a car low, fixing it, selling it high. And so as we progress into this world, the collector quality of vehicles is really where it's at. And so another faction of the driven vehicles will be purchasing a car, completely refreshing it, a badge plaque, making it one of the best in the industry. You'll be able to own a tokenized share of that process, have a community input into what kind of parts and build that we do on it. And of course, as we sell that vehicle, we'll also be including you guys in the profit share of that. And so the whole platform together is a way to engage, find out what's going on, a fresh new style of content, and then ultimately a way to monetize your passions. And so as we move down the road to real world assets becoming tokenized, we plan to combine those together. And so we really appreciate you guys joining us today, and we look forward to keep going in the future here. Alex, is there anything else you'd like to add? How do we
Yeah.
sign up for the newsletter?
Yeah, so there are two ways. You can go to drvnlabo.xyz. I just pulled it up here. You can see our the different brands that we've got under the Driven Labo brand banner, and then scroll on down, and you can sign up directly right there. Or you can go to drvnculture.xyz, and this is where we currently have all of our newsletters published. You can go back through the archives and see everything that we've shared. You will have to sign up to get full access to each of the issues, but yeah, there you'll be able to see, it'll be in the top hero section, a sign up form. So that's drvnculture.xyz. And I guess while we're here, I wanted to just kind of like into one of these to kind of show people what they can expect out of the newsletter. So this comes every single day to your inbox. This was the one from Monday. This is issue 49. And in this one, we talked about Nissan is thinking about bringing back the Silvia. But of course, like so many other brands, they're thinking about making it electric. So little news there. I know. We can talk about that in a minute because I got a lot to say. And then touching on the Web3 side of things, there's this game called Celeros, which is a lot of fun. So this is on the Polygon blockchain, and it is, think of it like a F1 meets drone racing. So you fly around in these like drone style F1 cars. I've live streamed this on numerous occasions. It is a lot of fun. And so we provide an update on a new track that they introduced and some new features. And then we always throw in a little meme there for for laughs. But stick to about 2 to 3 topics per edition. Make it a quick read, something that you can just enjoy with your cup of coffee in the morning, and kind of get plugged into some of the more interesting side of things that are happening in the automotive space. But now I got to ask you, what do you think of an electric Silvia? Is it even a Silvia?
No. No. That's all I have to say. No.
Yeah, I mean, so I got two things to say about that. One is I feel like something that makes a car what it is, let's say, you know, there's a legendary name or placard in the space,
Correct.
Corvette, Mustang, Sylvia. They, what makes them that thing is their configuration. A Sylvia is a small front engine, generally turbocharged, but not always, coupe, rear wheel drive.
Turbo.
Uh, Similarly, a Mustang is, V6, a V8, two-door rear wheel drive. A Corvette is, a sports car, rear wheel drive, except everybody's going away from the formula now that makes these things what they are. Corvette's now mid-engine. A Mustang is now an SUV.
Yes.
And
They're talking
in
about
this
doing that
case,
with the Eclipse too.
yeah, well, they did the Eclipse
Yeah.
SUV, so that already
Oh,
exists, which
exactly.
it doesn't make any sense. And now they're going to make an electric Sylvia, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, uh, electric cars can be very fast and very fun, but one of the things that makes a Sylvia what it is and why people like me, why we love them, is because they're light and their handling is incredible. So, um, with an electric car, you won't get the handling. It's too heavy to have that nimble handling that that the S chassis are known for. Um, and just from I guess, a subjective point of view, I feel like electric cars can be kind of soulless. Yeah, they're fast, but they don't have all that driver feedback that really gets you excited. I
Hmm.
think once the G forces in a straight line wear off, the fun to drive aspect of it drops away very quickly. And even with like a 250 horsepower Sylvia, the amount of like raw input or output technically to the driver, that you get out of it, they're just so much fun to drive.
Yeah.
So,
And you can even notice that like in the newer NSXs and like even a newer GTR for that matter, with
mhm.
the electric motors to help assist steering and sure there is the additional handling, but when you're going 130 in an R32, you feel it and you hear it. If you're going 130 in a GTR, you feel like you're going 60 on the highway.
Yeah,
It's kind
an
of
R35 specifically, yeah.
yeah, different experience.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to find out more about the token and how the driven um, vehicles were going to go, where would I see that, Alex?
Mhm. All right. So for that, you'll go to driven vehicles. So there's a link for it directly on drvnlabo.xyz,
Hmm.
and you can go to driven vehicles right here. Wait for this to load for a second.
And this kind of
There we go.
explains the process and the real world asset tokenization and
Exactly. Yeah. So tokenize, conserve, and monetize. So you can read the white paper. We will be updating this soon. We have some changes that we're making to it. But we give an idea of a lot of the cars that we're going to be
Mhm.
importing and tokenizing and adding to our collection. So Skyline GTR, S Chassis, NSX, Toyota Supra, Mazda RX-7, and Fairlady Z, among others. It's like Evos and even Stagias are starting to build some, following here in the States now that you can actually import them.
Yeah, and some of the older classics like the Hakos and the 2000
Oh,
GT
yeah, of
eventually, and some of
course.
the the classics.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we talk a little bit about our ecosystem token here, Buster Coin, which is going to be technically relaunching, but launching in the next few weeks as well. This is uh, a sort of a rewards token for our users, as well as um, unlocks different features based off the amount of Buster tokens that you either earn or purchase. So you'll get different benefits based off of how many of our ecosystem tokens you collect. So all that information is here. And also another interesting thing to mention is that there's a mechanism within our Buster token that every time the token is bought, sold, or transferred, a small tax is taken out to go towards some operational expenses, such as, insurance for the cars, maintaining them, overhead for the facility, things like that, as well as charities that we'll be giving back to. And because, big kind of cultural inspiration for a lot of our generation of car enthusiasts was the Fast and Furious series. And I have kind of like a personal affinity with Paul Walker. I just think he was a great person, a great actor. And, I think we can attribute a lot to what he provided in his life for the automotive world. We've selected two of his charities, Reach Out Worldwide and the excuse me, Paul Walker Foundation, that we will be donating a portion of the token tax revenue to as well. So all the information can be found at drvnvhcls.xyz. And yeah, I feel like that pretty much covers everything.
Yeah. So in the next episode, we're going to be talking about the first vehicle that we'll be tokenizing. That kind of ties into that theme. I think we've saved that for a bit of a surprise. But with that vehicle, we'll be also asking for member contributions on what to do with it and how to take the direction of it, how to modify it, and kick that party off. So yeah, lots to come in the next series and the next episodes of this podcast. We really want to thank you guys for joining us and letting us tell our story to you. And yeah, Alex, nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, always good to chat with you. I know that we can definitely talk for hours and hours, but
Wow.
hey, look at that, we're just under an hour. I think we did a good job for our first podcast, keeping it relatively succinct.
And as we put this out on the different platforms, if there's things that you want us to talk about, items you'd like to cover, any things you want us to go more in depth to, make sure to include that in the comments, and we'll make sure to include that. Again, this is all community based. We love to hear your feedback and opinions. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'll also add to that, if you've got a really cool story or a build that you'd like us to showcase, do reach out. We'd be happy to create an article about it within the Driven Culture publication, or even have you on as a guest.
Yes.
Similarly, if you're building in the automotive space, building a brand, or if you're in the automotive Web3 space, that we would love to have you on and learn about what you're doing and share it with the community.
Yeah.
So definitely reach out. We are here to add value. And so I think with that, I'll just sign off by saying, please go follow me on X at Rext_racer. You'll see in the bottom ticker there. Also follow our Driven Labo account at Driven Labo. And if you're interested in the Based Buster coin, our ecosystem token, that's at Based Buster coin. Josh, where can people reach you?
We're currently in the process of transitioning, but you can see us on Instagram at Revhard Motors. Same with Facebook and YouTube. You've recently seen our logos change and adapt, and now you can see why. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be fully transitioning into at Driven Labo. But yeah, you can currently see us at Revhard Motors, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. The Money Shift Podcast.
Yeah. This was the first edition of the Money Shift Podcast. So hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you next week. And yeah, I think that'll do it.
Signing off.
All right. Okay. Cheers. See you guys later.